Welcome once again to another edition of Tax Watch, brought to you by the concerned taxpayers of Duval County in cooperation with Comcast Television. My name's Tony Bates. I'll be the host for today's show. I'm also a former past president of concerned taxpayers, and I'm still active on their board of directors and participate with them a lot. Last month when we talked with you, we promised we were going to bring you some information that we thought you needed to hear about. And so that's what most of this show today is going to concentrate on. It's going to be about the use of your tax dollars to give away to what we call corporate welfare, to give to corporations, taking money from you to give to other businesses to compete against other businesses. And so we're going to have a lot of information on that for you today. And this day, we're taping this show the day before Thanksgiving, so we're going to be, you'll see this show between now and the middle of January. And so there's going to be a lot of information that you'll have a chance. We want you to let other people know about all this information too, so encourage them to watch this show. And on our last show too, we also talked to you about a few issues that we thought were important that you talked to your legislator about, because we had some issues that were going to be before council. Well, evidently many of you responded because your council, one of the main issues we had before council was the elections issue, with which they wanted to change the date of the elections to combine it with the state elections, which we thought was a bad idea because we thought it took up all the chatter space, or we couldn't concentrate on local issues. Well, thanks to your help and your support and your obvious contact of your council people, they voted and defeated that bill. So that was a key victory for the citizens of this community. And we appreciate you for talking with your council people and making sure that we did not get our local issues lost in the debate with all the state or even maybe federal issues. To help me today, who is always a participant with this show, is one of our most active members who was served with me when I served as president for several years, as what I considered my key man as my vice president, and that's John Winkler. John is also a member of the board of directors of Concerned Taxpayer, past president of Concerned Taxpayers. He's also currently president of the League of Women Voters.
Vice president.
Vice president, excuse me, John. excuse me, Nick Callahan, who is president of the League of Women Voters. And he's just very active in a lot of things, other than having a law career and practicing law here in Jacksonville, civil and tax law. John, welcome. And thank you for here participating with me and helping me bring this information to the public and for all the work that you do, John.
Well, thank you, Tony.
What John has put together a video presentation of a lot of work of JEDC and a lot of the places of where a lot of your tax dollars are spent. And most of this show is going to be about these issues and what has happened to your tax dollars when government takes them from you and gives them to somebody else. John is going to be the narrator of most of this. And John, would you walk us through the process of what we're going to talk to them about and how we're going to present this information and what it's about and what they ought to really be looking for, what we want them to, the information we want them to have?
Well basically, Tony, as I think most of our viewers know, one of Concerned Taxpayers' biggest issues over the years has been essentially government tax money waste. And this presentation doesn't just include corporate welfare, although that's a big part of it. It also covers other projects that we think, for good or for ill, have turned out to be wasteful, however well-intentioned they may have been at the beginning of their life cycle.
Well, John, if I guess the best place, because we're going to be short of time and we've got so much information, I would guess maybe we just go straight into the process, and then maybe we'll save 2 or 3 minutes, and John's going to narrate all this information as he gives it to you on the screen. Normally it's a back and forth conversation about what's going on within the community and about local bills and local legislation. But today we're going to concentrate on just this information about this particular thing, about economic incentives. They're taking other people's money to give to some other people. And we want to emphasize why we think this process is not effective, and that it's not the best way to handle tax dollars, or not the way you should invest your tax. So, John, if you're ready to go, I think we ought to just move right on into the process. And, let's give our first example.
All right, and feel free to chime in anywhere here, Tony. I call this, well, there's my hand appearing on the screen, waste much and want more. And essentially, the first example that I have, if it'll go ahead and change the slide, is the Everbank One naming rights. If you'll recall, Everbank Field.
Everybody remember, this is our first attempt at this process.
Yes, so there are bound to be some bugs here.
Right.
But I call this what price Jaguars. In early 2010, our city council, which had originally agreed to share the naming rights of our stadium with the Jaguars 50-50 when the Jaguars first came to town, agreed that they would reduce that share down to 25% because apparently the Jaguars were having trouble convincing anybody to step up and name the field. A few months later, though, with a deal coming out on the table, the city council took part of our bed tax money, which had been going to the convention center, and devoted that over to stadium maintenance, which is a cost of millions of dollars a year. At the very end of the summer, right before the season was about to begin, in order to make the name Everbank Field appear on the stadium, we agreed to give away the last 25% of those naming rights, so that 100% of the naming rights revenue was now being given over to the private concern, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Interestingly enough, since that time, we've had Everbank consider moving their operations from their present location, which is across from Blue Cross Blue Shield, about a mile from downtown, in that brownfield area that we all think of as being so highly contaminated right on the river. They've been making noises about possibly moving downtown. So the city has now offered them, in exchange for moving their operation downtown and bringing a few more jobs in as well, $2.75 million as just a grant in order to move. Literally, you can see both buildings in the same sight line. And then, in addition to that, they're offering them what is called a QTI, or Qualified Targeted Industry Incentive, of another $2.1 million in order to add what they call new jobs, which apparently Everbank's planning on adding in any event. So the question that arises, of course, is as Everbank pays money to the Jaguars, if we're paying money to Everbank, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
So,
and really what he's done, you've taken and poured water out of one side of the bucket and then poured it back in the other side of the bucket, and where have you gotten?
Well, all I know is that the floor is really wet right now. So, and apparently we, the taxpayer, wind up with a whole lot less water. So, now here is another example, which I call lasso for economics, the Equestrian Center, which is one of my personal favorites as an example of something that may have been well-intentioned, but certainly has gone awry. In the case of the Equestrian Center, we had a group of people a number of years ago who came and swore to us, these horsey folk did, that they would raise $5 million as a contribution toward building this Equestrian Center out on the west side of town. Now, to date, they've come up with less than $100,000, which is under 2% of what they promised as their contribution. But every year, we have a $600,000 operating deficit for the equestrian center. So at this point, the whole operation out there has cost us approximately $40 million. We certainly don't see that it's going to ever turn around and produce anything like a break-even proposition by having events there. So the solution that's been proposed is that we now spend more money on adjacent property out there in order to move the fairgrounds from downtown, where they presently get a big draw, out to general vicinity of, well, it's beyond Cecil Field. I mean, there really is very little out in that section of the county. This is lousy fair agronomics. Is it too much fun for one weekend? Because the Georgia-Florida game occasionally coincides with one of the 2 weekends of the county fair, we essentially have a demand from the Georgia and Florida people that we move the fairgrounds, that we move the fair, that we not have a fair that ever interferes with them, or maybe they won't have their game here. That's beside the point that I think the Bulldog and Gator fans all like having the game here. So in order to do that, we're going to have to spend at least another $8 million and swap some land that the city presently owns downtown with the fairgrounds people in order to avoid this conflict that's coming up again in a couple years. This I call laissez-faire bondonomics, otherwise known as the public paying for private play. This is an example of a public-private partnership, and this picture, this nice picture of our downtown shows the courthouse garage. There are 3 of these garages that are involved. What has happened is that we had originally guaranteed a garage owner some years ago that they would receive an 8% return on an investment, but the actual amount of the investment that they had to make was quite minimal. I mean, this was an example of a extremely highly leveraged public-private partnership. The taxpayers, because it is a bonded issue, the taxpayers also wind up being responsible to pay the interest on the bonds, even if there's no profit being made by the parking garage owners. Now, they built the parking garage down at the courthouse years ago. The courthouse, as you all may know, has still not been completed, so for many years we've had an empty parking garage that's been receiving a subsidy of several $millions a year in taxpayer funds and a guaranteed profit to the people that we made the public-private partnership in order to build the garage. I personally think that this is a prime example of just how good these public-private partnerships are for the private element of the partnership.
And even now, the city council or the council committees, finance committee, has just been over a process that maybe we ought to buy those contracts back from because there is a provision we can buy those contracts back, and instead of losing $2 or $3 million a year, if we buy the contracts back, we own the garages, then maybe we'll only lose $1 million a year on the operation. So that process is, but it's been extended for a couple of years. But that's the position we put ourselves in, that we have to even borrow money so that we won't lose as much money by borrowing money, and we operate those things ourselves. That's under consideration.
Right,
Go ahead, John.
and since one of the points here was that we were not going to be reducing our bonding capacity by using this, if we do buy them back, we are reducing our bonding capacity by another $50 million. So we can't win for losing, folks. Not with not with the deals that we make. Now, here's one of my all-time favorites in terms of really not even getting a portion of what you paid for. This is our almost finished new courthouse, which is now at a cost of $350 million. Here's a brief history of what happened. 11 years ago, we approved a bond issue that put $190 million into the issue for a new courthouse. And we do have to do something about courthouses. That is a responsibility of the county. But after we cleared the land, we demolished buildings, we started to consider construction and realized that our plans were incomplete. We couldn't do it for the price that was involved. But instead, we built a chilled water plant there, and the parking garage that I already mentioned did get built. When the new mayor, John Payton, who's now gone, became mayor, we had already increased the budget to $211 million. After another year and a half with nothing happening, this was back when Mayor Payton referred to us as the radical fringe because we were opposed to raising the amount of the cost of the new courthouse. At $294 million, a lot of it had just been completely wasted on plans that were unbuildable and on paying for operations to oversee construction that wasn't taking place. We had guaranteed funds that were going out to people that were overseers who were just sitting around in trailers. So after a year and a half, Payton fires the architects. He then hires another builder subsequently who went bankrupt. We wound up ultimately with him proposing a $395 million budget. At that point, it was more than double the original $190 million. And City Council finally balked. They blinked. This was back in late 2007. They all wound up agreeing by spring of 2008 on a $350 million budget. Because of the recession, it looks like we might actually come in on that budget, but we're not getting a complete courthouse, folks. We're getting sort of 60% of a courthouse, and the upper couple of floors are what they call shell construction, meaning it's studs. Maybe someday, as growth warrants, we'll actually get in there and finish out that portion of the courthouse. We finally started construction in May of 2009. The projected date for completion, and I don't know that they'll be able to pull this in, is this coming spring. But it should be sometime shortly after that if they don't get it done by then. But at what price? That's my question. Here, rapidly moving along to another of our many fine projects that has gone very much nowhere. This is the La Villa Bistro. As you can see, after a number of years, it's still sitting there boarded up. This was a project where, which I call greasy fair gastronomics. In 2003, the City Council approved $2 million for this project. $100,000 was a grant, $1.9 million was a loan. But as you can see from the building that you just observed, we're not getting paid back that $1.9 million on the loan.
And a grant we never get back.
A grant we never get back. And a grant is free money, even if the people that are receiving it are completely honest about their intentions. Again, I don't know whether or not this is an example of a deal that never could have succeeded, or whether this is an example of not doing proper due diligence on the part of the city. But the point is, you got $2 million that got put into a structure that we don't even have a potential use for. Since 2008, a 90% completed building has been sitting downtown off of Union Street. And if you're driving through town, by all means, look at it. Now here's one of my personal favorites. This is the old blues club downtown that's in La Villa. Ain't got a dream that is working. I ain't got nothing but the blues. As you can see from the building, everything that's been invested in it has produced nothing but an empty shell. This is the Genevers Hall, which was a great venue of the early jazz greats when Jacksonville was a center of not just the movie industry, but of all kinds of social activity. And despite putting nearly $1 million into this dilapidated hall, we now have a dilapidated hall. And there's no, again, you know, the city's finally come in and taken the property back, but there are no plans to do anything with it that I'm aware of. Here we have one of the biggest I think, and most expensive, hard to call it anything but a boondoggle, folks. The train to and from nowhere, laissez-faire governomics 101, the people mover. Like Chick-fil-A, the people mover is closed on Sundays. So not only does it not go from very many places to not very many other places where it doesn't tie into any greater communication system in a very efficient way, but you can't even write it on a Sunday, even if you're so inclined. Although I did notice yesterday when it was raining in front of City Hall that the structure did protect the people in Hemming Plaza from the rain. So it was being used for that. But again, what does it cost? I say, is this any way to run a railroad? Each mile that a passenger rides on the Skyway costs the taxpayers $32.24. And this is how we get to that number. Operating expenses are over $6 million. Fare receipts are only about $300,000. You have an operating deficit of $5.7 million. You have trips. The cost per trip's a little lower. $12.67 is being subsidized for each trip, and $32.24 is being subsidized for each passenger mile. So the trips on this thing amount to being a little more than a quarter of a mile each, and we are paying an enormous amount for that.
And what was our original investment for the city? $25 million? Was it a $75 million project with $25 million?
Roughly that.
Roughly that.
And one of the reasons that we can't simply abandon the Skyway, and I'm not suggesting that we necessarily want to, but we can't just turn it off for now and turn it back on later, is that we'd have to pay the federal money back if we were to do that.
Yeah, and because the politicians were convinced that, oh, well, we're going to get $75 million, so we ought to give away $25 million. And that was a logic used behind investment.
And there were a lot of numbers that were bandied about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of passengers that would be riding the Skyway.
But it's that principle, well, we're going to get all this money, we don't have to put up this money, not forgetting that all that is all our money anyway.
Which is precisely the point that we always come to.
I don't want to slow you down.
No, but we got to speed up. Other taxpayers are still us.
Yeah, right.
Here's an example from the north side. This is an auto dealership that, as you can see, is not selling automobiles. Now, I do want to say that since I took these photos, they have gone out and boarded up the windows. so there is progress being made. In this case, what we had was, originally this was supposed to be an entertainment complex with movie theaters. We put $3 million of taxpayer money in. The banks put $27 million into this. As you can see, the result that you wind up with is scarcely worth any $30 million. We were promised 607 jobs out of this operation. As you know, there might, I don't know, is there even a job for a night watchman? If there is, he's not keeping the windows from getting busted. So there are no jobs created as a result of this. The Jacksonville shipyard's moving rapidly. The billion-dollar mile has wound up costing us approximately 40 million tax dollars. Adding insult to injury, when they didn't foreclose in time, we wound up having to pay the people who held the tax certificates at 17% for borrowing money from ourselves. Just insult to injury. Now, quickly, with 2 minutes left, qualified targeted industries. This is what the City Council now uses as its primary vehicle for liberating us of our taxpayer money. And that back in 1995, the Florida legislature created a program whereby taxpayer dollars are used on a rebate basis to supposedly pay for new job creation. This is QTI, Qualified Targeted Industry Program. 80% of the money that winds up going into the program is coming out of Department of Revenue dollars, and 20% comes out of local dollars. So it has the effect of putting the cities in Florida in competition with one another for this 80% of the money that's coming from all of Florida's taxpayers.
Well, John, I guess maybe we ought to come back in-house, and then can you go over and just verbally from your script tell the other that we didn't even get to yet? Have we got some others that we weren't able to get to yet that you want to mention? Because our time's running out. We've only got just a few minutes left. Are there some other key things that we ought to mention too that we'll talk about maybe some other time?
Well, let's just cut to the chase. Right now we have pending examples of QTIs that are in front of City Council. One of those is the Chase deal, which was supposed to be voted on last night. This wound up getting kicked down the road, however, to February of 2012. This was a proposal. This was a proposal to pay Chase, which we consider to be a terrible corporate citizen. Chase has been fined over $450 million in the last 4 months for violations of Treasury sanctions and assorted other bid rigging. Chase put Jefferson County, Alabama into bankruptcy after bribing their officials and causing the mayor of Birmingham to go to prison.
Well, John, we're going to kind of have to
wrap
yeah, we're going to have to
nothing.
But thanks to a lot of the public response, this has at least been kicked down the road until after Valentine's Day, till the first meeting in February. So this one has not gotten passed yet. So we need your support. We need you to talk to City Council about these issues. And yet there's supposed to be an auditor's report about the activity of JEDC and whether these things have been successful or not. And hopefully that's going to be out before we come back, because this program is going to air between now and the middle of January. We're going to go through the holiday season, and we need to talk a little bit about that. We appreciate that you have worked with us and contacted your council people and that you're being taught. We encourage you to join the concerned taxpayers. Come participate with us so you can gather this type of information. You can go to our webpage at www.jackstaxpayers.org. There you will find a lot of contact information about how you can get in touch with us, or you can even personally contact me at Tony Bates at juno.com. Just my name, Tony Bates at juno.com. And we'll make sure that you get some information. We need your participation. We need your activism in this process. And again, we want to thank you for participating with us, for being with us in this process and working with council and being an active citizen yourself. We need you to be a citizen lobbyist. And also I do want to mention too that we want to put a welcome out, a get well greeting out to Rod Morrow, who has been our legislative chairperson and who has gone through some back surgery. And Rod, we wish you well during the holidays. And to Connie Benham, who's doing her homework, and she's now not only a citizen activist as us and a public warrior, but now she's also turned into a handyman and house repair person. So for those to the holidays, and John, to you,
happy Thanksgiving.
And to all our public, we want to say, for those that are watching now, it's happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas. Hope things went well for you through the future to the holidays, or at the holidays road, that you had a good time. We'd like to thank the people here at Comcast for making this opportunity available. Kobe, who's with us here, and David, who's in the room in there somewhere where I can't see him, but we thank them. We won't put them on screen like we saw one happen, but again, we want to thank you for being with us. www.jackspayers.org. Bye. Happy holidays.